let's have a conversation about consumer confidence and the public's perception of the economic conditions and viability of the environment to do business today in America. Because as we all know, it's a significant driver on how entrepreneurs effectively run and stabilize their business and forecast for the future. According to my friends over at the conference board, however, entrepreneurs today are on high alert. In April, the conference board's Consumer Confidence Index fell to its lowest point in 5 years. Additionally, a recent survey commissioned by the Associated Press revealed that more than half of Americans are worried about the prospects of a pending recession, leaving today's American entrepreneur between a rock and a hard place as they look to grow and scale their businesses because they're unsure of how the overall consumer will respond to market conditions and their level of skepticism when it comes to whether or not to invest in the marketplace. During these uncertain economic times, it's important to gain the perspective of someone who's been there and done that and seen everything the entrepreneurial world has to offer. Thus, I want to turn our attention to the conversation I had with my friend Colin Walsh, having built and sold beauty companies for over $500 million, including the sale of OUAI to Procter Gamble. He's encountered his fair share of challenges when it comes to scaling businesses while keeping things balanced and fulfilled. These experiences have significantly impacted Walsh's ability as a leader and the way that he interacts with people and approaches his new work in his new venture with YayDay. And Walsh joined me this week to have a conversation about business leadership, entrepreneurship, and wellness. If you're on the cusp of scaling your business, this, my friends, is a conversation you can't afford to miss. So, without further delay, I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. My friend, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to talk to you all about your journey in entrepreneurship, my friend. Great to see you, and happy birthday to you, my friend.
Thank you. Super happy to be here, Kev.
Absolutely. So, Colin, I wanted to start our conversation by asking you, what do you think are the principles or keys to long-term or extended entrepreneurial success? Because I know that you've had plenty of practice in building and scaling businesses and brands. So what do you think is the number one or key or a roadmap to entrepreneurial success, my friend?
Well, I can answer it, I guess, most clearly from my own experience, Kev. And for me, my ability to kind of endure and show up and face the challenges that any entrepreneur faces is if I'm connected to the things I care most about. And if I'm connected to the people I do it with, the reason I am building this business or trying to make it go forward every day. And so it comes down to as simply being attached to your own passion and purpose. I have found no ability in myself to endure in the long term against things that just don't resonate with who I am or what I think is important in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colin, I'm also curious to ask you is, your motto for success, or the thing that you rely on to get you through the good times and the bad times. I'm curious, is there a particular motto that you rely on when things are good and when they're bad, my friends?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I think less of it is a model, honestly, and more of an approach or a philosophy. And it is around the power and belief I have in people and surrounding yourself with obviously talented and remarkable people, but diverse perspectives, points of view, and experience, ability to show up emotionally grounded and intelligent, and share with a vulnerability and curiosity that lets you face any problem. So my model would be always surrounding myself with people with different points of view, creating space and vulnerability as the leader that everyone has a right to share in their opinion, to challenge my thoughts first and foremost, and have the courage to acknowledge that they don't know the answer. I think creating spaces that are safe for people to show up, solve problems, and not always have the answer is the conditions I would try to create in a leadership team with people I work with. And that, for me, has been the key to any success I've ever been lucky enough to be around.
Absolutely, and I know that your claim to fame, my friends, or at least one of them, is scaling beauty brands like Procter and Gamble and OUAI, my friend, to over $300 million before you gave up the opportunity to lead those companies and brands, my friend. So I'm curious how you look at the concept of leadership and innovation, and can you tell me about your journey and how you've evolved, certainly, as an entrepreneur based on those experiences?
Yeah, listen, I've been so lucky, and it's really been an interesting journey. One I couldn't have planned, candidly, is I started my career working in large multinationals. I worked at Pepsi, I worked at L'Oreal for many years, and there's great leadership learning and experience that you can find in a big multinational. But it's a complex organization. I find multinationals, by the function of their size, end up protecting or preserving very often more than dynamically growing. And then the next stage of my career was leading these independent, private equity-backed beauty brands. Most specifically was Diva Curl was one brand I led for nearly 5 years before we built and sold that. And then YayDay, which is the beauty brand that I led for 5 years until almost 2 years ago, which we built, scaled, and sold to Procter Gamble. And I think in that space, those independent brands, what becomes really, really powerful is, as I mentioned, the team, the thought leaders you have around it, in the clarity and purpose of the brand itself. It has to connect with a consumer. I think a really healthy and powerful brand has to show up as a person that you could understand and relate to and believe and appreciate that it has a full-fledged personality and persona. And so that's been an incredible journey, those leading and exiting those brands. And then most recently, I'm actually taken even a further step where I'm the co-founder of my own startup in the digestive health space and a brand called YayDay. So that is even more, if one step further away from being a multinational, where every decision really you can measure the results, both the success or failure. You're constantly learning and iterating. It's incredibly humbling to start a business when revenue is at zero and all that's been put in is investment, and every day is a battle of growth. So it has been an incredible journey, and I continue to be in it and learning, but it's gone from the very big to the absolute smallest company, which is my own, that I am trying to build day over day.
Yeah, and you talk about, leadership in business. It comes in many forms. And when we lead in business, I always say it's important to lead with empathy because then you can understand and relate to the value of the business and the value of the people that are running it. So I'm curious, how do you think leadership and empathy are connected in business?
Wow, this is a great point, and I share it completely. I think empathy sometimes is a hard concept for people to really understand or action against. Because I think done wrong, it's okay, I will listen to your perspective, but I'm not sure I will allow it to change my opinion or what we know about the business or the decision we're going to make. So I think a couple of key behaviors that I believe are critical to successful leadership. One is vulnerability, the ability to not know the answer. As the leader, when you don't know the answer, I believe my job is to have some of the best questions, not always the best answer. And so if you're asking questions of a team that knows they have the opportunity to share their point of view, their expertise, their unique perspective in the world, that is the condition that I think looks like empathy and is a form of empathy, but it starts with a leader being vulnerable enough to not know the answer. Because I think if you believe you know the answer, you have a blind spot that you don't tend to be open or empathetic to other perspectives. So being clear where you don't have the knowledge, don't have the answer, or need help, that vulnerability, I think, is how I would coin that's a cornerstone, I think, of effective leadership. And unfortunately, is often not what most leaders think leadership looks like. They think they need to show up with certainty and confidence. And I think it closes that exact important door you mentioned to empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. Building your own brand. I'm curious, as you go through this journey now, Colin, I'm wondering, with your experience at Procter and Gamble and all of the other brands you've had a chance to lead, and as you sort of embark on your own journey, what sort of lessons or experiences do you think leading those bigger brands will help you in expanding and growing your own brand now, my friend? I'm curious to get your answer there.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Kev. And I think sometimes, like in life, be it politics or philosophy, people tend to these days end up at either end of the spectrum. And I think the most thoughtful conversations and understanding is when you understand the value in both sides. So I don't believe a multinational is better or worse than an entrepreneurial founder-led startup. They're just wildly different. And so the learnings I've taken from multinationals, I think they are matrix organization. They're full of people. They're much more complex. They don't move as fast. However, they're really remarkable at finding efficiency, scale, resilience. They defend territory and market share and space very, very well. So those are some of the key attributes of a multinational that you can apply. So when you're starting a brand, you're so focused on creating growth, but looking for efficiency, scale, and the ability to defend the gains you make are some of the lessons I've learned from big multinationals that absolutely are applicable to a startup.
Yeah, and I know, Colin, that you've got a following of over 18,000 people when it comes to teaching them about entrepreneurship and branding, my friend. And I'm curious to ask you, how do you think branding and building confidence are interconnected?
It kind of touches on something we were talking about before, Kev, that I think a brand is an easy word to say, a harder word to understand. A brand for me has to have life. It has to have values. It has to have a promise, both at a product level. Of course, what is the product or service delivering? What can it expect? But then how is it delivered? This is where the brand comes in. How it looks, feels, speaks, responds, customer service, all elements of interacting with this brand. Do they create a cohesive persona or personality that is the glue? That is where the relationship lives with the customer. That's where the value and the real long-term health lives. So I think understanding that at a core level, turning a brand into a person for me is the simplest way I look at it. And does this brand feel like a living, breathing person? And I think the most successful brands and businesses, be they services or product companies for me, have a really clear personality. Not all the same, but a very clear personality that their customer relates to, responds to, and that's where the connection, the human connection lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Colin, I'm a huge believer in life and in business. You can't really rise to the level of expectation for anyone else artificially unless you set a level or a baseline level of expectations for yourself. So I'm curious for you personally, my friend, what provides you inner motivation and the drive to continue to build and scale businesses? How do you define inner motivation, my friend?
Oh, big question, Kev. I love that one. For me, I'm motivated by this force of curiosity. I have come many years ago to the startling realization of even after 25 years in beauty and all the things I've been lucky enough to experience and do, if you were to accumulate all the knowledge and perspective I have relative to all the knowledge and perspective I could have in the world just as a human being, what I have could fit in a thimble versus the ocean of possibility of learning and understanding that exists in the world. So that curiosity allows me to continue to explore new spaces, meet new people. I've moved from beauty into digestive health because I believe that sits at the center of a place of health and wellness and mental health and well-being for people right now, which that deeply excites me and motivates me to try to very simply help people live their best life every day. So moving into wellness and digestive health did that. So my fuel to keep going and my motivation shows up through curiosity to learn, to acquire new skills, meet new people, and feel like I'm leaving and creating something sustainable and positive in the world. That's what wakes me up.
Absolutely. And Colin, I am someone who believes that if you're a leader, one of your best assets are the people that you're in charge of leading, and empowering people that you're in charge of leading is one of the best ways to maximize both productivity and interest of the people that you're leading. So I'm curious to ask you about leadership styles and the best way you think we can maximize the people that work for us as business leaders. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I've got a couple. One approach I've held for many years in leading companies is a perspective of win-learn. And it's certainly not a perspective I invented, but it's certainly one I adhere to greatly. That in every outcome, I think we've got to be really clear as a team, what is the win we are after together? Why are we going to apply our energy, our resource, our time, and potentially our money against this activity? Are we clear on the win we are after? If we are, then we go for it. And only two things will happen. We will either win, we will get the thing we thought we were trying to get, or we will learn what we didn't know, why it didn't happen, what we might have misunderstood or miscalculated. But when you operate from win-learn versus a win-loss, you allow people to operate with more courage, more clarity around positive action. We're doing this to go get this positive outcome. And if it doesn't happen, the good news is we will learn something because we really thought this was the best way to get great outcomes. So win-learn has been a governing philosophy for me for many, many years.
Absolutely. And Colin, I'm going to share this statistic with you because it leads into my next question. As I shared with you before we started recording, buddy, I was born with cerebral palsy, and I've dedicated my life to, or at least my adult life, to speaking to businesses about the positive benefits of hiring folks with disabilities, because the Bureau of Labor and Statistics reported last year that only 22.5% of people with disabilities were actively employed, and it was actually the highest it's been in almost over a decade, my friend. And I truly believe that people with disabilities are natural problem solvers and can lead to innovation. So what do you think is the key to increasing the amount of people with disabilities who are employed? And what do you think are the positive attributes they can bring to a workforce, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Such a good question, Kev. And I think I'll also call on, as a real life example, the conversation you and I had before we started recording, and talking about the exercise you do and how you, from a problem solve perspective, how you can move your body in the most effective way to create health and dynamism and energy for you. You had to problem solve, where someone without cerebral palsy may not look at that situation, may have no understanding or appreciation of the problem solved, the uniqueness, the benefit, and the value of that exercise to you, both physically, emotionally, and psychologically. So it all lives in understanding and appreciating the strength, the unique perspective, and what I would always call superpowers, that I think everyone lives with superpowers. The most fulfilled of us have found them, and I get to apply them every day and get to help them navigate their life. But I believe they're in all of us. And so when working with people of varying abilities, finding their superpowers that may not live in the most obvious forms, but live in problem solving, live in endurance, live in self-reflection, live in determination. These are all perspectives that add so much to the discussion of leadership, of understanding, of empathy, of creativity, all of those pieces. So I think understanding where superpowers live and how really unique superpowers are developed in people with varying ability, physically, emotionally, psychologically, practically, are all enormous advantages to scaling and running any form of business, or just growing as a team and as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Colin, I'm curious to tap into your expertise and growing and scaling a business from the perspective of the right time to do it, and what are the importance of developing a strategic game plan and having the discipline to stick to it, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
It's a really good question. It can be a complicated answer, but I'll try to simplify it a bit through the many things I've learned. An end plan starts with a clear goal at the onset, meaning oftentimes in the entrepreneurial vision, a lot of people talk about building and selling or exiting a company. I have seen that go very, very well, and exactly what someone hoped or intended to do, to build this company and sell it. And it was a wonderful chapter of their life. And that company then went on and endured, and they profited both financially and practically by building it. I've also seen founders build and scale companies and sell them and be really emotionally distraught, confused, demotivated, and alone at the end of the process, because they weren't as clear of how much value that business was giving them beyond money. It was giving them meaning, perspective, connection to the entire team and industry maybe they were in. So I think really being clear up front of what really motivates you as a leader or as an individual. And do you want to build and scale a business to sell it? Do you want to build and scale a business so it can sustain your lifestyle? Do you want to build a business that your family could be a part of and work in for years or generations to come? Those are all very different starting points. And then along the way, there's very important decisions Are you funding the business yourself? Are you taking outside funding? When you do, that changes the complexity of how a business is run, and different people have ownership stake. So there's a lot of complexity in the middle. And so scaling a business, there are the key metrics of, revenue and profitability and market size and market share and how you could grow both domestically and internationally. Those are the business metrics, but the personal metrics of what am I trying to accomplish? What am I deeply motivated by? Am I clear on that now? And am I checking in on that throughout the journey of in scaling this business to make sure you continue to make choices that lead you in the ways of fulfillment and joy and ultimately success, which I think is being happy and doing what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colin, I'm also curious to ask you about forming an inner circle of mentors and the importance of having people to lean on when you grow and scale a business. And how big do you think that inner circle should be?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there's some practical limitations. I think if you only have, I think the danger is if you have none or one as a mentor, if you have a limited number of mentors, often people gravitate to personalities, voices, or philosophies that are much like their own, because that feels like a natural affinity. That won't always provide you a great new perspective or insight on how you're running your business. On the other end is you're talking to everybody and you have this large board of 10, 20, or you're in networking groups and you're always seeking information or insight from people. I think that can be equally distracting and unhelpful. Somewhere in the middle is, I think, 2 to 5 core people. You can only manage and maintain really clear context on yourself, personally and professionally, the business, where it's going, and in those people that you're asking to be a mentor. And I think I would be always looking to have mentors in the places that I think I'm weakest, where I think I need the most help. And that's challenging. And that's back to that vulnerability and curiosity as a leader. Having mentors that help support and assist you in the blind spots or the weak spots is powerful. It can be unsettling because you're showing up to a mentor without deep knowledge, but that's exactly the place that I think you get the most value from a mentorship relationship.
Yeah, and building on your last answer, I'm also curious to ask you about the importance of listening, as business people, especially when we first get a business off the ground, we have a vision and a purpose to what we're trying to do, and sometimes it's hard for business people to relinquish control. So I'm curious, how do you view the importance of listening to others when building a business or attempting to be a better leader? What are your thoughts there?
I think that's for me, has been a really interesting tension. I think there is an element of being a founder or a leader, particularly in a founder role. You have to believe in something kind of irrational, that your business or brand deserves to exist and has the right to exist in a world that it currently doesn't. That it can take up a space with consumers' minds and in the marketplace that it currently doesn't exist. You have to believe that you can make that happen. And so there is an innate belief that takes passion, sometimes, irrational or unrelenting commitment against the perspective and point of view of others. So I think it is a tension that you've got to be really aware of. You have to be able to listen. You have to be able to hear perspectives that maybe aren't yours, hear points of view that may challenge your initial point of view or belief in what this product or service could be. And also hold some of that magical conviction that you as the founder or creator need to have to make a business come to life. So it is a real balance, I find, and one I hope to get right more often than I don't, but I know certainly there's many days I don't get it as right as I'd like to, Kev.
Yeah, absolutely. And here comes a personally motivated and a selfish question, because I'm curious to get your answer, my friend. So outside of hosting this podcast, as I told you, am a public speaker and I talk to businesses about the importance of connecting with the special needs community and giving them work and gainful employment. But I'm also curious to ask you about your best advice for connecting with an audience, whether it be big or small, and how speakers or anyone from a public-facing perspective can connect with an audience. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, that's a really good question, Kev. I would tell you, I've had the good fortune over the years to speak to so many different audiences in different businesses I'm leading, an audience ranging from a room of 20 people to a room of 2,000 people. And, there's practical considerations in rooms of size and for whether people can hear and see and some of the logistics. But a habit I got into very early, and candidly because I didn't do it really well one time and it was a really unsettling situation, is to deeply understand and be curious about the audience you're speaking to. Get to know as much as you can before you commit to your content. And what I mean by that is a lot of speakers show up with, they're very focused on what they want to say, how they want to say it, the chapters of content. And I don't know if they always spend enough time to think about, wait a minute, who am I speaking in front of today? How did they get here? Are they all from the same? Do they all have the same concerns? Are there different concerns in the room? Am I speaking to different stakeholders, different people, different age groups, different points of view? Are there people who I'm going to have to convince about my topic? Or are there people that are stark raving fans? Is there a mix of both? Am I having to educate them? And so I literally, on a piece of paper, end up drawing the audience and proportionally make sure I have a real feel in how many total people are there. How did they hear about the event? Is there anyone speaking before or after me? What time of day is it? All of what is the audience experiencing? Or can I have an understanding and an empathy and awareness of what they're experiencing in the moment I have the privilege to speak to them? And if I start with them versus my content, I've always found that my content is, I can shape it. It's my own content. I can edit. I can pivot what I open with, what I close with, where I can stop for questions or input, how I'm expecting responses from the audience or not at different moments based on that pre-thinking and working up front. So it's really been what I call drawing the audience to make sure that's been my most successful tool to connect to an audience of any size, is to be really clear on who's in it, how they got here, and everything I could possibly think to understand or relate to about them before I ever open my mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. And Colin, I'm curious because, CNN recently reported that consumer confidence in America is at its lowest point since May of 2020. So I'm curious to get your perspective on why you think consumer confidence is lower today and how that affects entrepreneurship and the ability to scale businesses.
Ooh, that's a powerful question, Kevin. And I think for me, confidence, be it consumer confidence or the root word of just the root idea here of confidence, relates to trust. And you have confidence when you trust you are getting the facts. I think there has been a real attack, and I'm not in any way trying to be political, but there has been an assault on the idea of trust or of facts and what is truth and where we source information and how polarizing our information is. And now there are news sources that are quite fascinating. They will hold both perspectives from a political point of view, one issue and how it's being reported from one side of the aisle and how it's being reported from the other. And where what facts are either omitted or highlighted on one perspective or the other. And I think it creates this real distortion or dissonance, and people don't know where to turn for facts, where to feel confident that they're getting truth. So I'm in building a new brand or a new business or entering into the world today, I think building trust with your customer becomes critical. And it's some of those simple behaviors of promise very few things, but keep them all. Don't make a litany of promises and make some and let some go. Make very few promises, keep them all. Build trust, build transparency, allow insight and visibility of your customer into your brand or business, how you've built it, why you built it, who it's for. And that nurturing of trust, I think, is critical in building brands and businesses right now. And as I said, I think it's at its all-time low because I think it's hard for people to understand where do they get facts or truth to build their trust or confidence now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the few minutes I have left with you, my friend, I'm going to combine my last two questions because they're connected. I'm curious to get your perspective on personal growth and how you challenge yourself to be better in that regard. And when you look at your life and legacy, how do you want that to be defined?
As fortunate as I've been in business and been able to scale and have exits and some of the things that can be regarded as success in a business context, the legacy I would ever hope to be remembered as is someone who helped support and develop people in teams and created a space for people to show up as their whole selves at work, to be seen on all forms of their personality, their identity, and their whole self. They got to bring it to work and add its remarkable value to a team, to a business, and then participate in those successes. So if my legacy would deeply hope to be people saying, I really grew working with Colin. I really felt like myself working with Colin, and I felt seen and valued as who I am working with Colin. And that would what I'd hope to be my legacy versus any of the financial metrics or the scoreboard that I've been fortunate enough to be around.
Absolutely. And finally, my friend, tell me if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
So absolutely, you can get me on social, Colin J. Walsh on Instagram. You can get me there. You can get me at colin@myayday.com if you want to send me an email. MyYayDay.com is our website, and I'm happy and fortunate to hear from both customers, and I'll be grateful to hear from any of your listeners as well, Kev.
Absolutely. Well, Colin, I want to thank you for the transformational path that you've laid in entrepreneurship and for joining me to engage in conversation. My friend, your time and expertise on my behalf is most appreciated, and I want to thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you so much, Kev. It was an absolute pleasure. I am a stark raving fan and applauding you in all that you're doing and the wisdom you're bringing to the world and the conversations you're having. So thank you so much.